Voiceover is everywhere, and you hear it every day. From radio.
Number one for New Country 96.3 Hawkeye in the morning.
To TV.
Alpha, Readers Escape. Recruit a team of teenagers with attitudes.
To movies.
I see you have constructed a new lightsaber. Your skills are complete.
To animation.
And games, Spider-Man!
And so much more.
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid.
Welcome to episode 18.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at the world of voiceover, including movies, TV, animation, and more. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest voiced the insano-maniac Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, on the 1994 Spider-Man the Animated Series.
What in the name of...
It is my master, Dormammu, who confers this gift upon you, Cassidy.
Gift?
Remember, you wanted the same power that I offered Eddie Brock.
This is it?
But to enjoy it, you must first swear to serve Dormammu forever.
No problem, man. He sounds like my kind of guy. Let me have the power. What do I do?
This is a symbiote, a living organism. It must bond with you.
And then I get to be like Brock?
Similar, but different. As different as you are from Brock. Once you bond, it will reflect your hatred for humanity, your lust for destruction.
I'll take it.
It must take you.
Come on. What are you waiting for? I am yours, man. We're gonna wreak glorious carnage throughout the land.
Carnage, eh? I like the sound of that. You promised us carnage. Deliver it.
What's wrong? Cassidy is gone. There is only carnage. War Machine! He reacts to loud noise!
I've got just the thing. A concentrated sonic disruptor blast.
Ah, whatever you do, don't stop! Who are you? Your offspring.
Offspring? Yes, we recall replicating.
Our flame-headed friend sent us to get this. Call us Carnage.
Carnage? There's another symbiote? Sorry to interrupt the reunion,
We hoped we'd run into you again.
You know me? Cassidy!
Think of the damage we can do now, man!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Scott Cleverdon. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Trenton Larkin, as I live and breathe. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Am I detecting a Scottish accent?
Yes, I am. I'm from Edinburgh, yeah.
Okay, well, it's very...
Well done.
Thank you. Well, it's there, but at first I was thinking I was hearing an Irish, and then I listened a little more, and I was like, no, that's definitely Scottish, but it's kind of subtle. It's not super there, but it's there, you know?
Well, I haven't lived in the United Kingdom for over 25 years, and I haven't lived in Scotland for slightly longer.
Okay.
And I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and about 2 or 3 years of that in London. And I've lived in Spain for the last 13, 14 years.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
I spend most of my time making Spanish, if you could possibly imagine it.
So do you have a kind of an accent when you speak Spanish, or does it come through kind of fluent like from the country there, or?
No, I mean, I speak Spanish pretty fluently, but no, I have an accent. I mean, I can try my damnedest to get rid of it, but no, I've always got something.
A Scottish Spanish, that's different.
Well, one of the reasons that my accent is the way it is I've always had the need to be understood.
Yeah.
Right. And the trouble is, if you speak with a very, very and I've rebelled against my accent from a very young age. Because the trouble with any accent, where are you from, Trent?
I'm from Texas, originally born and raised, but I've lived all over the world, actually. So
right, whereabouts in Texas?
I was from Dallas, Texas area.
Right. Are you like from the good part of Dallas or the bad part of Dallas?
The good part.
Right. Like, just think of the bad part of town.
Yeah.
right? Just think about all those guys who talked in the way that you heard them and you went, oh, Jesus, that's trouble. You know, where you went, oh, no, I think I might have to go to a different bar or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of accents all over the world, all in every single country. And what that accent is about being accepted. It's about being the lowest common denominator, and it's about inspiring lack of understanding.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that we do, it's like you're studying psychology right now, aren't you?
I actually graduated last May with a associate's in psychology, but yeah, I did study psychology.
Well, one of the things that you need to do in that terms is always to be understood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now there's accents which are part of where we're from, but there's also cultural accents which is part of what we're from. I believe, and there's a great amount of, most people will fall into the standard way of expressing yourself, and then there's everybody else, and we have to be understood on our own terms in the wider scale of things. And if you go back to Texas, you're down there, you're doing, it's all going to come flying back. It's going to be there again. You're going to be there.
You sounded like Blake Shelton.
Well, that I'm Scottish. What do you expect?
That's awesome. Your Southern is good, man.
Yeah, well, all of what's very interesting is for British people, the Southern accent's one of the easier accents.
Really?
Yeah, because it comes from a certain degree of tension and a certain degree of, and there's more sounds to it.
That's cool. That's awesome. I had no clue how diversified you are as a person, like, until I looked more into your background, and then hearing your accent, I'm like, this is sweet, because you're actually my second international guest. I had my first from the UK, but getting international guests for me has been a little bit more challenging, just because sometimes the time difference or whatever, but I'm super excited to be chatting with you today.
Well, no worries. I'm always very interested, because the other thing that I've been doing for the past 15 years is I teach film acting, and as George Bernard Shaw said, if you want to learn, read. If you want to understand, teach. And if you've ever done any teaching, and I'm sure you have, you must have done some teaching training.
Oh, I have. Yeah, I have.
You will realize that when you're teaching, you have more revelations about the thing that you're teaching than you could ever have if you were just reading about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because sometimes when you're teaching, you learn something too.
Oh, no, absolutely. I regularly I'll go, oh my goodness, I just came up with something I'd never thought of before. Okay, stop the presses, everybody. All right, this is my guru moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I have because of voiceovers, and because I work with people and I coach people in English, and I coach people in their acting, that I've come to all of these conclusions, and I work from the point of view of science, not from the point of view of faith, which is really the difference between working on camera and working in the theater. In theater, you need faith, and on camera, you really have to apply scientific principles to it. It's to a real reason why people do what they do, why they decided to do what they do, how they develop their skills at doing what they do, and it's got a great deal to do with psychology. Anyway, so. What else did you discover about my illustrious, infamous past that seemed interesting to you?
Well, Batman, the new Batman animated adventures, and Gargoyles, where you played John Castaway.
That was really my first voiceover job in LA.
Was it? Okay. Well, we'll definitely dive into that. One thing that super surprised me was a game that I absolutely loved playing on PlayStation 1. It was Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles.
That was me, yeah.
I was like, dude, I played the crap out of that game when I was a PlayStation 1 gamer, because it was so good. And you could play multiple colored lightsabers, not just green and blue and red. It was like pink and yellow and orange and all kinds of crazy colors. And then this is not voiceover, but one thing I've learned in my time of interviewing people is that you have to be an actor first and foremost before you typically ever get into voiceover. And so I wanted to speak just a little bit about the Borgia, because my wife is a hardcore fan, and it's kind of a homage to her. Plus, I got into it watching it with her, and I loved it.
Right. Well, okay. Right. This is the important thing you got to remember. Okay. There's two, right? There's two of them. One is Jeremy Irons, right, who plays the Pope, and the other one has John Doman from The Wire, and he plays the Pope. I'm in the one with John Doman, not the one with Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, I believe so. He's also the one that played on Gotham, right?
That's the one.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
yeah,
God for that. No,
yeah.
because sometimes people will go, "Oh my God, I love that show," and I have to go, "I'm sorry, man, I'm not in that one."
No. Yeah, because I always try to do my research.
I don't feel bad. I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Really, I'm really sorry. You had a really good point 5 seconds ago, and I just crapped all over it.
No, I always try to do my research so I know what I'm talking about. But then all of a sudden I was like, wait, do I know what I'm talking about?
Well, the other interesting thing about that show is that my wife plays Vanozza, who is the Pope's consort.
Oh, wow.
My wife is Assumpta Serna, and she's made over 100 movies and speaks 6 languages.
Holy crap.
And she has voted on the Oscars since 1992. She's one of the most prestigious and well-respected actors and most international actors here in Spain.
Holy crap, dude. I'm like beyond, like my jaws dropped on the floor and I'm like, wow.
If you want to look up Assumpta, nip over to your computer and look up Assumpta Serna. It's the way it sounds in IMDb, and you'll have a quick see. I mean, she was in terms of things that she's done, like Comic-Con type stuff. She was in whatchamacallit, in The Craft.
Oh wow.
She was in we did a show together called Sharp's Rifles.
Okay.
Which you'll either know or not know. I have a strange Doctor Who connection as well.
No way. Okay, well, we might briefly go into that too then. Well, man, I mean, I was just watching Spider-Man and I just came along across the, Venom Returns Carnage episodes and was like, dude, I wonder who this guy is that plays Carnage. And I looked you up. And then the second thing I saw was Batman Beyond playing Jack from the Royal Flush Gang. And I'm sitting here going, holy crap, this is cool. And so then doing all the research I did today, I found all these other shows. And I mean, I was just like, wow, dude, I always get surprised by the actors. I like them for one thing and then find out there's a ton of other stuff I'm into. So it's...
What I was really cut up about is I moved away from LA in the exact moment that they started doing the animated series of the Clone Wars.
Oh, that stinks.
The guy who did Obi-Wan was, he's a brilliant voiceover guy. His name escapes me, but he does everything. I mean, he's just, I take my hat off to him. He's just an amazing guy. But it was just the story of getting Obi-Wan is an interesting one because I used to be with ICM, International Creative Management, for voiceover. How I got there is a different story for another moment. But they said, come in and read for this. So I was given, it was on a cassette tape. If you remember what those were.
I do.
Back in the days, right? It was on a cassette tape, and it was a recording of Ewan McGregor doing some lines from The Phantom Menace. Now, this was before the movie came out or anything like that. So, and then I had to go in and then I had to imitate him. The director, whose name escapes me right now, is a very nice Irish guy. And on the day I started working, I said to him, why did you choose me? And he said, well, it's a slam dunk. I thought I'd get a Scottish guy of roughly the same age to imitate a Scottish guy of roughly the same age imitating Alec Guinness.
That's awesome.
And I went, that makes sense, I suppose. And Ewan McGregor is a contemporary of mine. We're more or less the same age. And we sort of started out together in London at the same time. Although I never met the guy. But we would always sort of like pass each other and be going up for the same sort of jobs. And anyway, that's how I happened. And because I was a kid, I was 8 years old when I saw Star Wars. So I grew up imitating all the voices. So I had that moment when I was standing in front of a microphone in a studio in Hollywood with the script in front of me. And I had to say, may the force be with you. Right? Sorry, that's a glass. That's how I used to do Star Wars. I used to do that to entertain my friends. I go, the force is strong in this one.
That's awesome.
I tell you, most voiceover people have probably done that.
Yeah.
I have you now. So the thing that I started doing when I was a child, which I think is something that you'll find in common with all voiceover artists, is that we started doing funny voices and imitating people. And basically, that sort of workout at a very early age gave us this ability to do it as we got older. It's not the sort of thing that you can start doing when you're a grown-up. It's the sort of thing you start doing when you're a kid. And the reason that you start doing it as a kid, and this is part of the psychology of it, is I believe that we want to be accepted. We want to say things that might be listened to, so we do it in a different voice. And we want to make people laugh. And the reason we want people to laugh is we want them to love us. Because I don't think anybody becomes an actor because they had an incredibly happy childhood. I think that we become actors because we have somewhere, some moment in our upbringing and the development of ourselves as children, there was a deficit of love. We didn't quite get what we needed. So this was a tool that we developed to get that love.
Wow, that's deep.
Mic drop.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Wow. Whew. Okay, wow.
So what is very interesting is one of the things that you'll hear, and I've only listened to a few of the episodes, is you will find that everybody has a story that started out with, indeed, like you and you yourself with your father.
Yeah.
That we discovered that you could change the way you sounded. And that's what makes people improvisers. That's what makes people have a dexterity with their voices. That's what makes people able to do other accents. Is because it's a way of finding a degree of acceptance at any given moment. And what you'll find is voiceover people have a tendency to drop into any one of a million different voices they can do at the drop of a hat. That flexibility and that dexterity they have with their voice, with their accent, with their tone, with all of those different things is much part of their nature as anything else. That their voice becomes this protean way of being understood and being accepted.
Wow, that very deep. And you have such a smooth voice. It's very like relaxing to listen to you. And yet I'm like learning a ton at the same time.
Thanks very much, Trenton.
Wow.
Hi, we're here tonight with Trenton. This afternoon, I should say. But one of the things that the questions, which is the toughest thing for a teacher, but it's the question that you want from any student or anybody you're speaking to, is why. If they come up with a why and you can give them an answer, then we can step forward. And that goes with it. That goes with everything. Why do you want me to do it? I want you to do it for this reason. Why is that like that? It's that for that reason. Why? And a lot of the time people go, why do actors become actors? And after all of these, I've taught 11,000 hours of on-camera training. After 11,000 hours, I can tell you that is pretty much why actors become actors. That is pretty much why voiceover people become voiceover people. And that is pretty much why people become successful.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Scott. I mean, my mind is blown, brother. It's, you say some deep things that really get me thinking about stuff I've never necessarily thought about before. So, wow.
It's one of the things that that I find with young people who have a comfortable upbringing is I'm almost like, it would have been so much nicer if your childhood was miserable. It would have so much easier. You would have stretched yourself so much if you'd faced rejection from a very early age, not just in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful thing.
One of the first things we like to do when we have a special guest on the show, Scott, is just to find out a little bit about them. And who were you growing up, and how did you get into acting, and more so voice acting?
That's a great question. Ever since I was a child, I've imitated other people's voices. I did that to make my friends laugh. I did it to make my parents laugh. I did it sort of to become accepted. I think there's a thing that children have when their imaginations are slightly bigger than their circumstances, is that they begin to invade those other worlds with their own imaginations. They get into movies and TV shows and comics, and they begin to imitate people left, right, and center. And that was certainly my case. Also, I grew up in Scotland, in a very working class area of Edinburgh called Leith. If you've ever seen Trainspotting, that's where I'm from, and all that implies. And from a very early age, I sort of rebelled against my accent. It's not that I couldn't do it. It's just that the accent, like a lot of very working class places, the accent becomes a way of not expressing yourself in your individuality. It becomes a way of fitting in with everybody else. So that caused me all sorts of problems because they thought I sounded stuck up or I was trying to sound clever or anything like that, which didn't help the fact that my name was Cleverdon, which meant I was clever clogs or smart ass or any one of a number of other things. But I didn't kind of let that get to me, which is rather peculiar thinking about it. I was a sort of rather precocious and overly, I don't know, I wouldn't say intellectual, but I just remembered stuff when I was a kid. And I'd never considered acting really until I was sort of through my mid-teens. And I had a bunch of other friends, and they were all equally precocious and smart as I was. And I started doing theatre when I was at school, Broughton High School, and I It's a place called, it was the youth theatre that we started there, and we started doing proper plays. And we were doing a play called She Stoops to Conquer, a restoration comedy written by Oliver Goldsmith. And my drama teacher, Hugh Patterson, God bless him, he looked up at me one day while I was doing a costume fitting, and out of the corner of his mouth he said, "Scott, have you ever thought about doing this?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Have you ever thought about, being an actor?" I was like, "What?" He said, "You could do this if you wanted to." And that sort of started the wheels in motion. And I did my play, and I loved it, and I came off stage, and I went, "This is what I want to do." It was better than any drug or any experience I'd ever had. And so he helped me, and I went to drama school for 3 years, and I studied, and I came out, moved to London. I started working in film and television, which I had no clue about because my training was an entirely classical training. And I muddled my way through that, and eventually I got a job in a thing called Sharp's Rifles, which I did in the Ukraine, where I met my wife, Assumpta Serna, and we fell in love, and we moved to Los Angeles, and I lived there for about 10 years. And I started working more in film and television, and then eventually I worked out how to perform on camera, and I started doing voiceovers. Cut to about 7 or 8 years later, I started teaching film acting with my wife, and we've been doing that ever since, in between working in film and TV and various other things. So that's the acting story, Trent.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for diving into your past. And it's always wonderful to to learn about where somebody comes from, because, like we were talking about before we started the interview, psychological aspects of psychology are very much, I think, a part, like you were saying, of voiceover. And it's just interesting how those fundamental aspects of psychology play into VO.
Well, one of the things I think is the first way we have of concealing our identities is the way we speak, and all of us do it. All of us, non-actors, actors, everybody changes the way they speak depending on who they're speaking to. Whether they're speaking to their teacher, whether they're speaking to their father, whether they're speaking to their minister, whether they're speaking to the cop who's just pulled them over, when they're speaking to the judge.
Yeah.
Everybody modulates and changes the way that they speak. The difference being is that the actor, or the voiceover actor, we're capable of modulating that way we're speaking based on entirely imaginary circumstances. And that's usually something that we started doing from a very early age. We imitated our teachers, we imitated our dad, our uncle, we imitated things that we heard off the TV or things that we heard in movies. It's changed a lot recently because of YouTube and because of DVD, VHS back in the day. What we could do is we could listen to the same thing over and over and over again. We could quote whole reams of text from movies that we loved. And that's really where it all kind of starts, is for the young person, for the kid, is we begin to imitate those movies as part of play. And that some people are better at it than others. But you look at a couple of kids playing cowboys and Indians, you'll see them. They're in the moment. They're worried about the arrow that's coming over the ridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is really, that sense of play is really just what we do as actors or voiceover actors. That's really just an extension of that play. And I think most voiceover performers would agree that it is an absolute privilege to get to play in front of a microphone and then see your work sometime later with images to it. It's stunning. I mean, you feel like a kid. That's really what it is.
Absolutely. Well, when we talk about psychology, it kind of makes me think of a character you played on Spider-Man named Cletus Cassidy, who needed a psychologist.
Well, I asked them about that character. I said, is Carnage coming back? And they said, listen, we got a problem with Carnage. I said, what's the problem with Carnage? And they go, well, this is like a Saturday morning cartoon show. And I went, yeah. He said, well, he's a serial killer. And I was like, He said, yeah, I know. It's just a tough one to fit into the world, this kind of milieu. Because Cletus Cassidy is a red-headed, psychotic serial killer. And that is one of the toughest voiceover jobs I ever had to do. And I'm not sure whether you've spoken to other people who did the animated series, but the director was very, very exacting. And if you've heard my work in it, it's screaming and cackling and more screaming and some more cackling.
He's very psychotic. I actually just finished the entire Spider-Man series today, so
it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting, that work. And it's the same thing when you're doing a video game or those sorts of things. You will find yourself for a couple of hours grunting or falling or being killed. I don't know if you've spoken to other people. I haven't listened to all your podcasts, but when you're doing video games, if there's fighting in it, it'll be like, all right, Scott, you're falling off a short wall. Okay, you're falling off a slightly taller wall. Okay, you're falling off a wall and breaking your ankle. You're falling off a wall, breaking both your legs. You're falling off the wall, breaking both your legs and dropping your weapon. Right?
Yeah.
And each one of those things, it's a purely imaginative thing because you're going, ugh! And you go, okay, it's a little bit sharper. Ugh! Right? You're hurt a little bit more. Ugh! Right?
Yeah.
You're not going to die. Ugh! Okay, you're fighting through, And all of those elements, which will ultimately be used in various different cues in a game or whatever like that, they're coming from nothing. You know? And one of those great things when you see a great game is also I love video games. My wife loved video games. It's magnificent when you hear a great voice performance, and it's terrible when you hear a bad one. But the Cletus Cassidy is possibly the most I played a lot of bad guys in my time. An awful lot of bad guys. and this was a pleasure because he was an American, pretty much a New Yorker, and he was an insane, psychotic, possessed by an alien entity, just like Venom, but slightly worse.
And I wondered why Carnage never returned. Now, they returned the character of Carnage Spider-Man or Spider Carnage, but they never brought Cletus back, and I was kind of sad about that because they did have the return of Venom, which was the episode 10 of season 3, and then episode 11 was officially called Carnage, so you were only in those 2 episodes. But I mean, as a kid, that character was definitely one you couldn't miss. I mean, the episode starts out with him being, trapped in a building by the whole NYPD, and he just says, they're like, let's not cause any problems, and he's like, why not? And throws a grenade out at the cops. I mean, he's just completely bat nuts.
Yeah, well, one of the, that was the real issue with it, because I hadn't sat down and read all of the comics. In fact, John Semper gave me Maximum Carnage, the book. I still have it here, actually, the book afterwards, and I just started reading. I was like, geez, they can't put this in a Saturday morning cartoon. This is pretty. This guy's an absolute. There's nothing redeemable about this individual.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. So I think that was the real reason that they couldn't put him in there. And it's very interesting because of Batman Beyond, and the fact that particular point in the 90s, the kind of Saturday morning cartoon sort of thing, was the only way really to kind of get superhero content under the wire.
Okay.
We had the Batman films, etc., but it wasn't until Tobey Maguire played Spider-Man, at the start of the century, that we kind of went, wow, we can actually do a superhero film that's not embarrassing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But up until that point, there was no real way of putting those sorts of elements together and sort of making them work. And now we've got Superman. We have superheroes that cover every single point on the compass. We've got from the darkest, which would probably be Deadpool.
Yeah.
The darkest and most postmodern superhero, which was originally written as a sort of antidote to the actual written print comics, and it was very timely when it came out because the world needed an antidote to all the superhero movies that were about at that time. So Deadpool was written for a literate audience in the printed comics, and Deadpool the film was timely for a literate film audience who understood all the superhero tropes, the 3-point landing and everything else. Because otherwise, nobody would get the joke.
Yeah. Well,
And
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was, there's actually supposed to be a Venom movie coming out, and there's talks that Carnage may appear for the first time on a feature film.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and Sony's doing it, so I'm not sure if it's going to be in correlation with kind of the crossover that they're doing with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're talking about the film being rated R, so if that's the case, I could definitely see Carnage being in the film.
Just get Sam Rockwell.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic. Actually,
there's really what's happened right now is that the being involved in a franchise is so lucrative that you can really get the best of the best. I mean, you've got Benedict Cumberbatch playing Doctor Strange.
Oh wow, yeah.
You've got Robert Downey Jr. playing what is essentially a kind of third tier superhero in Iron Man. I mean, Iron Man back in the day was never like, he wasn't a Batman or a Superman.
No.
He was a little bit back there. He was no Wolverine. He was no, he wasn't one of those guys. So what it means right now is you can get absolute top drawer talent to come and do something interesting. And the interesting thing that's happening now is they've realized that we have to change it up. We've got to get good original directors to make good original films, not just the same things as ever before. You see that in Guardians of the Galaxy. You see that in the new Thor movie. Did you see the trailer?
Oh yeah, it looks fantastic. I cannot wait to see how that all comes down.
Who would have thought that the biggest influence on the new Thor film would be Kung Fury?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we're going for. We're so postmodern that we've become retro.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting sort of future for that whole series of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And, I look forward to seeing Wonder Woman. And I think, Batman versus Superman, if you see the extended cut, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, I like some of the DC stuff, but I've always thought Marvel did it better when it came to feature films. But as far as the animated stuff, typically it's been DC that I've liked their animated stuff better. But when we're talking about the 1994 Spider-Man and some of that pre-stuff that was like on Fox Kids, like the X-Men animated series, those were like unbelievably stellar. But it seems like a lot of the Marvel stuff produced today is more geared towards young, like 13 and under kind of young kid age. They do some of those superhero squad stuff where it seems like DC kind of keeps it more, adult and with the group of people that grew up with it. But everybody has a little different perspective. And like, I love the CW versions of all the DC shows because I think they have done a fantastic job with the DC characters. So it's really interesting how different facets of media do better in some ways than others,
Well, what's the interesting thing that's happened with Comic-Con, with the rise of Star Wars, the continuing rise of Star Trek, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC Universe? 20 years ago, Comic-Con was something that was snickered at, something that was sneered at.
Yeah.
Now that's the core of the movie industry right now. The people who were geeks, well, ladies and gentlemen, they have inherited the earth.
Yeah, it used to not be cool to be a geek or to talk about, I know every episode from that TV show. Then people look at you like you are a psychopath.
Well, this is the curious thing. The most tragic thing you could think of back in the day was being a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
I saw somebody the other day walking down the street here in Madrid, and they had a TARDIS case on their telephone. Right, and
wow.
It's become part of the culture, entirely so. That it's no longer. It's really become our new mythologies. I think every generation has their mythology. When I was a kid, it was Star Wars, and that bled into Indiana Jones. And I think there were sort of dry periods throughout the 80s and the 90s, but then it all kicked off again with the Buffys of the world. And I think what's also happened is that it sort of retroactively began to invade TV. TV is now better than it's ever been before, and they're applying these rules of, hey, let's just make the best show that we can, because they've worked out that that's what people are interested in. You know, the demographic is the people who are really into it. And that's why we end up with Jessica Jones and Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Gotham and Legion, etc., etc., etc.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you kind of mentioned Doctor Who, and I believe you have some kind of tie-in with Doctor Who. Is that correct?
Well, this is very interesting. So, I when I was at drama school back in, must have been started in 1989.
Okay.
I was in drama school. There was another guy there who we became very, very good friends, and he was a complete and utter sad case geek boy about Doctor Who. Now, I like Doctor Who as much as the next man. Come on, you know, Tom Baker was my doctor. What can I say? So I really liked it, and I loved talking to him about it. And you know that thing that kids do. Can you imagine? Like if Rutger Hauer was the Doctor? Can you imagine how good that would be? Can you imagine? Right? You know, we'd have those conversations.
Yeah.
You know, being adults and everything, we would have those conversations. So we both moved to London at the same time. And we'd meet up for coffee in the center of town. And he'd turn up late because he was at Forbidden Planet, the big sci-fi bookstore, because he was buying like Doctor Who books or videotapes or goodness knows what. And, you know, he loved it and we would talk about it. Now, you got to remember, in 1989, Doctor Who was cancelled rather ignominiously. Badly. Ignominiously. I've been speaking Spanish all day. It's very hard for me to speak English right now.
It's okay.
Lo siento. I'm sorry. So he would always turn up late because he was always buying Doctor Who memorabilia and everything else like that. So what happened was in 2005, they resurrected it with Christopher Eccleston, right?
Yeah.
He's a very well-respected actor. And it was great. All of a sudden, Doctor Who was kind of cool again. They sort of managed to make a show which everybody liked. Right? The people of my generation went, hang on, this is much better than I remember it. It touched on all the tropes that we knew and loved before. We kind of fell in love with it again. We went, this is really, really good. They found an emotional core to it, which was probably missing before. And it white broadened its appeal. Well, about halfway through its run, they revealed that Christopher Eccleston was going to be leaving at the end of the season. Okay? And they revealed the new Doctor. I don't know if you watched. Did you watch Doctor Who?
I have, yes. I haven't watched it emphatically, but I've definitely watched it.
Right. So do you know who the Doctor was after Christopher Eccleston?
I don't recall, no.
It was David Tennant.
Oh, David Tennant. Yeah, I loved him.
Okay. David Tennant was my friend at drama school.
No way.
David Tennant was the guy who would turn up late because he was buying videos and books.
Are you serious?
I have never been happier in my life about hearing about somebody getting a job. This guy, his dream was to be Doctor Who. His dream was to play the Doctor. And his dream was to play the Doctor in a TV show that had been cancelled.
Wow.
His dream was impossible. There was no way he could ever do it because the show didn't exist anymore. And I met up with him. I called him up immediately. I said, how long have you known? He said, I've known for 6 months. Right, because he's Scottish as well. You know, he's Scottish as well. I said, oh, it's amazing. Anyway, so we met up, and I went to London, and we met up in London. We were in the Soho House, which is a private club there, and we got our private room. So it was like, oh, congratulations, David. And he's trying to be cool about it. Oh, thanks very much. Because the news, it was like massive news.
He was like busting at the gut.
It was massive news. I mean, who the new Doctor is, like Peter Capaldi's leaving at the end of this season. Who the new Doctor is, that's it. His life has changed. Okay? All of the actors who now go into Doctor Who, their careers explode.
Yeah.
Okay? Like you have Karen Gillan who plays Galactica, I think her name is, in Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, Karen Gillan's a wee redheaded girl from Inverness in Scotland.
Okay? Oh, wow.
Right, and she was in it for, I think, 2.5 seasons or something like that, and she has a remarkable career. And she's become a very, very competent, decent actress through it. So we met up, and so everybody's like, oh, congratulations, David. And he's trying to be cool. Thanks very much. Thanks for saying that. They closed the door to the private room, and we both just lost it. We're running around screaming. Yes, get up, you. I was like, how long have you known? He said, I've known for 6 months. He said, did you tell anybody? He said, yeah, I told my mum. I couldn't tell anybody else. I said, so what's it like? What's it like? He said, oh, I filmed the reanimation scene today, the regeneration scene.
Yeah.
I was like, And it's like, wow. I said, are you doing it Scottish? He said, no, I can't. I've got to do it English. I've got to do it home counties because Christopher Eccleston, the Americans complained they couldn't understand him. So I'm being very English. I said, what are you going to wear? And I remember when I met him, I was wearing a kilt because I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
There's nothing more Scottish than a Scotsman outside of Scotland. Trust me, that's just the way it goes. You know, I used to bump into Americans and they go, where are you from? And I go, I'm Scottish. And they go, hey, I'm Scottish too. And I go, all right, how's that working out for you? No, my great-great-grandfather was the head of the Clan MacLeod. Of course he was, yes.
That's funny. I mean?
It's like past lives. Everybody was Cleopatra.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, you know, for David Tennant, he was actually, he's playing on the new DuckTales.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he's Scrooge McDuck.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so...
Well, so we met, and I said to him, I said, what are you going to wear? He said, I don't know what I'm going to wear. I said, you need a big coat. He said, why do I need a big coat? I said, because it's like a cloak. It's like a superhero. Wear a big coat. Right? And also because you're tall, it'll make you look taller. So that's the story with me and David Tennant, and David, who's in my phone as the Doctor. He went on to become the most popular Doctor Who, Doctor ever, and really a show that was already being successful just gave it a kick in the ass and took it to stratospheric heights. And you see a man who is just in love with his job when you watch him doing that. And it's the perfect casting because the Doctor loves being the Doctor. You know, he loves being himself. And that's what you get with David. And he's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. If you've ever seen him interviewed, that's him.
That's awesome. You know, so many times when someone's interviewed, you know, you're not sure if you're getting the real them or not, but that's great to know that David is the genuine article.
No, David has had an incredible career and he's going to go on and do great things. I think he's a wonderful actor. He was a wonderful actor when I knew him when he was 19. We played in the play 12 Angry Men together. He played the Henry Fonda part. And even at the age of 19, 20 years old, he had the chops, he had the confidence and the competence to really pull it off. And he's more than anything else, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I understand why everybody continues to want to work with him, because he's just lovely. He's just great. No, but that's a very important thing that sometimes people forget.
Yeah, is
that we're going to go work every day. Okay, remember, everybody, we're not curing cancer. Okay, we're making we're giving people an hour or so of entertainment. Okay, so let's just have fun doing what we're doing. This is important. People use our services more than they use that of a doctor or a lawyer or anybody else. You know, we as actors, we have a great privilege in doing what we do, and we should understand that we're very lucky to get a chance to get paid to do funny voices.
Absolutely, Scott. Well, you know, speaking of doing great voices, you know, I know you got to be a part of the Gargoyle show, and I believe that was your first venture into VO. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was with ICM theatrically, which means they're supposed to get you jobs in movies and TV, right, as an actor, on-camera actor. That wasn't really working because it's one of those things, you know, like if your dad asks a friend of his, you know, to give you a summer job, they never get around to giving you a summer job. It was a little bit like that.
Okay.
But one day, my agent, his secretary, a very nice lady called Mignon, called me up and said, "Hi, Scott. I just wanted to know, can you do like an Irish accent? Because I hear you're Scottish, and that's kind of close." It's no, by the way. But I said, yeah, of course. I said, because there's a voiceover down here in the voiceover department. Could you come in? Because they want to speak to you, because they need a guy to do like an Irish accent. So I went in, and they had a voiceover department. They had two little studios where they would record. They had two sound booths where they would record the auditions in the morning. Okay. And I went in, I recorded it, they sent it off. I got the job, I went in. And I'm working with the wonderful Keith David, and Ed Asner, and all of these extraordinary people who are very nice, having a great time. And Sheena Easton. And I played this character who became Cú Chulainn, or Cú Chulainn, depending on how you want to pronounce it, who basically transforms into this great Irish hero. So I was doing my sort of Dublin accent, which I'd learned doing a play some years before when I was at drama school. And I put some Gaelic into it, which is the only Gaelic I know. It's not Irish Gaelic, but it's Scots Gaelic, so which was Omacrush Nabush Nochege. Sounds great. Which actually means this man has extraordinary powers in Scots Gaelic.
Wow.
And the curious thing is Sheena Easton, apart from being a very well-known and respectable recording artist, went to my drama school in Scotland.
Nice.
And that was it. And I went back and I did various different episodes with them on Gargoyles. It was a wonderful experience, great people to work with. It was very different because you would go in and do the voices. There was no character. I didn't have a character sketch or anything. I had a rough idea of what they were supposed to sound like. The director's job is very often to explain exactly, because you've not seen the script before.
Yeah.
Explain what's happened, what the context it is, where you are. It's really to fill in. So they're working in an imaginary world and they're giving it to you. Okay. So very often I don't know if you've ever played a role-playing game. You ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very much, you're all part of this sort of consensual imaginary space. Okay. You need to know what's going on, what's happened before, where you are, what you're seeing, what your relationship is, what you're trying to achieve, all these different things to give this line or whatever it might be. And it's very interesting because you're not working with headphones on, because the trouble with headphones sometimes, and this may be different in other places in the world, but with headphones, and when I was doing all my voiceovers in LA, you never used headphones, because what happens is you begin to start listening to your own voice. And as you're beginning to listen to your own voice, you begin sort of mutating your voice into what you want it to be, and it sort of becomes dishonest.
Okay.
That's one of the things that you hear. Sometimes when you hear people talking like this, and they're doing commercials like that, is they are turning their voice into the voiceover voice. Okay? So they're beginning to sort of distort their voice and make it sound more voiceovery. Working on Gargoyles and the Spider-Man, what you'll find is incredible very naturalistic voices.
Yeah, they did sound very natural.
And a lot of the time you'll find that in commercials as well, like TV commercials. At that time in the 90s, the fashion was for incredibly natural voice production. You know, so people would go, you know, sometimes I just want to buy a soda. And I go to the store and I find all the sodas there, but you know, I keep coming back to this, you know.
Yeah.
They would all come up with, you know, let me tell you something. They would all lead in with a very naturalistic kind of point of view. And with the voiceover world, obviously that's not Carnage. Carnage is all, I will destroy you, you know. So that kind of thing.
Yeah. So when
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say with Cletus Cassidy, when he became Carnage, did they do some kind of alterations to the audio to make it more Carnage-y, or did you kind of do that vocally yourself? Or
no, well, what you hear when I'm Carnage is there's this kind of weird sort of reverby kind of distortion thing going on there.
Okay.
But no, all that weird, bizarre cackling, that's me.
Oh, cool.
That's absolutely me. And the thing with something like Carnage is that it goes from the very highest sort of shrieking cackling down into the sort of the most guttural kind of gravelly sort of thing you can go for.
Yeah.
You know, so it'll be like this, and then it would be all up, you know. So you're going through all of this thing down there, up and down. And you know by the end of the day, your voice is going to be wrecked.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, this is not, you're not performing Hamlet 8 times a week. Okay. And unless you got another job the next day, you're good.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
You know, your voice will recover and everything will be fine. You won't be permanently deaf. Well, at least me. I know what happened.
Well, you know, we've talked about some awesome shows so far and just some wonderful background in VO and with David Tennant. You know, a couple other great shows that you got to be a part of were the New Batman Adventures and Batman Beyond, which Batman Beyond for me was really epic because it was so futuristic and just out of this world awesome, I thought. And it was cool that I was looking up your career and I looked up that you played Jack Walker, who was Jack on the Royal Flush Gang in Batman Beyond. And for you, what was it like to get to play a part in the Batman worlds?
Well, you've got Kevin Conroy, right? Who's Batman? Who's I would just cast him as Batman. I think all the people who played Batman are basically, they wish they sounded like him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he has because he's in all the video games. He did all of that sort of stuff, and he just has this casual elegance. I mean, you have Christian Bale, who's like, "Where are they?" You know, everybody, swear to me. You know, they're all doing this thing, and his voice is Batman.
Yeah.
Also, and that was interesting because who was playing the King was George Lazenby.
Oh wow!
Who played James Bond in one outing and on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
That's awesome.
And Amanda Donoghue, who was very well known in the 1990s, and a very good actress, very, very good actress. She was on LA Law. So they went for that. George Lazenby is Australian. She's English, and I think I was being English at the time. So they went for that sort of British sort of thing. It's interesting. One of the reasons that I left LA is I got tired of British people being consistently evil. Is that we were always characterized as being evil. Now, if you want to ask me about my psychology, why I think that is I think there's a certain aspect of the British accent that can make Americans feel insecure about their intellectual capacity because we sound so clever. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but there is a certain aspect of all of those sorts of things, and those things have changed. I mean, you have Doctor Who, you have Benedict Cumberbatch as Sherlock. It's become cool to be British, right? And now more than ever before, it's the best time in history to be a young British actor or actress in Hollywood.
Yeah,
that they are everywhere. When people say, "Should I go to LA?" I go, "Well, look, British actors. You got Batman, you got Spider-Man, you got Daredevil." You got Doctor Strange, and the list goes on.
You got Rey from Star Wars.
Exactly. You've got Star Wars has always been sort of quasi-British.
Yeah.
It's always been sort of up there. And then you've got the most, possibly one of the greatest voiceover performances in history, which is Mark Hamill as the Joker.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Mark Hamill as the Joker. Well, he's channeling. There's aspects of the original Joker from the 60s TV show, but he's very kind of pre-1950s.
Yeah.
He has that sort of arch, almost English way of speaking that you would expect to find in a film with Katharine Hepburn. You know, there's a sort of elegance and a kind of sort of rotundity and precision with everything that he says. And I would challenge any voiceover artist to listen to that and not go, "I take my hat off to you, buddy. That is exhausting work."
Well, you know, Mark Hamill was also in Spider-Man. He played Hobgoblin.
That's right. I never worked with him. I did, because we did have the same voiceover agent.
Yeah. Oh wow, really?
And the way it used to work. Now, here's a little bit of inside baseball for you. I don't know what inside baseball is, but it's used in this particular way.
Nice.
So what would happen in ICM is they had two sound booths. And ICM prided themselves on having the best people at doing what they did. They had people who made not very much money, people like me, to people who made huge amounts of money, millions and millions and millions. People who would work from home and be driven everywhere.
Wow.
Okay. And people who were pulling in 12, 13, 14 million a year. Okay.
Wow.
And they worked every single day that there was. And what would happen in the morning is you would go in, and they would have a whole list of jobs that they needed voiceovers for. So you'd go in the morning and you would sit there with the most extraordinary group of people you've ever sat in a room with. So there would be the Mark Hamills. There would be, what's his name? It escapes me. Hellboy. Ron Perlman. They'd be just extraordinary people. And you would go in, record the audition, or several auditions, and then get on with your day. They'd call you, you'd go do the job. That would be it. Sometimes what would happen is that happens sometimes certainly on cartoons, somebody would call you up and they say, "Scott, I'm gonna send you some sites. I'm gonna call you in a little bit. Can you read them down the phone to me?" And you go, "Okay." So they would do that. They would audition you over the telephone. And Mark Hamill, I met him at one of the Christmas parties for ICM, and he was a very nice man. But I have to tell you, most people in voiceover are pretty cool people.
That's awesome.
You know, I don't know what's your experience been of people in voiceover who you've spoken to over the course of your podcast.
All of the ones I've spoken to have been extraordinarily kind and generous of their time and their gifts and their talents. And I mean, the community of voiceover itself has been the most friendly I've ever encountered in my life.
Mm-hmm. You ever wondered why?
Why?
It's because we do everything in secret.
So it's like, well, okay, so explain.
No, we're very touched that what we've done in a darkened room in front of a microphone somewhere has actually meant something to people.
Yeah.
Because we do it, and we're just part of a process. We give our voices. Those voices inspire, hopefully, the animators to do some great work, and eventually we'll see it. But we don't know when or how.
Because it could release whenever. You don't know, really, do you?
No, of course not. And it's different now with YouTube and streaming services and everything else like that. But you have to remember back in the day, to try and find your episode of da-da-da on a Saturday morning on TV, how would you begin to look for it? You know, you couldn't do a web search. You know, there was nothing on Google. These things would appear, you know. And somebody would say, oh, I saw that thing. And you go, where? How? And you go, I can't remember. So a lot of the things that you would do would just, you know, you would do them and they would drift off into the ether. And so consequently, when people like you, Trent, are interested in what we've done and the stories behind what we do, in general, this is not the norm. There's something sort of, I don't want to say heroic, but there's something quite demure about what we do. And a lot of the time what we're doing is we're concealing the way we actually sound. We're trying to sound like somebody else. Like if I'm trying to sound like Ewan McGregor, or somebody else is trying to sound like Alec Guinness, or somebody else is trying to sound like some evil space being who wants to destroy the world. The way you do. You know. So that would be why everybody is genuinely sort of like flattered and enthusiastic about what you're doing.
Well, and I never thought about it like that, you know, like just me in a dark room doing my thing. And, you know, especially with the way media and technology have advanced, you know, I can Google this and look up that. And back in the day, you know, there wasn't even internet, and then there was, and then it wasn't as, you know, sophisticated as it is today. And so I I never really thought about that. You know, it's not like you could just say, oh, hey, just look it up on YouTube, or just look it up on Hulu, or pull it up on Netflix. And, you know, speaking of those services, I wouldn't be where I am today to be able to relive some of my childhood dreams. Like I just finished watching on Hulu the Spider-Man animated series from the 94 era, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had Hulu not done that, you know. And so it's amazing because back in the day, it seemed like every time I turn a show on, I would see the same episode, no matter when it was, what year it was, what day it was. It would be the same shows, same episodes every time. And so you wouldn't get to see everything in concession. And so that's why I love these services that do provide us the opportunity to go back and relive things. And now we can more specifically pinpoint, hey, you were on episode such and such of season such and such. And yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
One of the most extraordinary things is that you don't realize it at the time, but what you've done is going to keep going on and on. And my wife has made, you know, probably close to 100 movies, and it wasn't until streaming services and everything else like that that we sort of started rediscovering that our old films exist in places, you know. And it's a terrible thing to say, but there's films that we found because somebody pirated them.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But the other thing that's happened is that has really shown the industry the thirst that people have for product, and what it's compelled them to do is to improve their product and actually put those things that people want on legitimate services that people will ultimately pay for. It's gone from being something that's stolen to something which is bought and paid for. And we see now with Netflix, Netflix is turning over a profit of billions, and it's investing it all and is making great TV, great movies, and some Adam Sandler films. But on the whole, it's really it's realizing that the best way to get people onto the service is because they want to watch Daredevil, or they want to watch House of Cards, or that they've got a new show that everybody's going to want to see, like the OA or whatever it might be. And I think it's just a matter of time before that is the way that we consume TV.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Legion the other day. I binge watched the whole thing, and all I could think of was, how did they put this on TV?
Yeah.
This is like you know, Twin Peaks was pretty odd. This was odder. You know, it was so non-linear, so incredibly fragmented, so wild in its leaps of logic and everything like that. And you go, wow, this is effectively part of the X-Men universe. Wow,
Yeah.
Congratulations. You know,
Absolutely.
but really, I'll be honest with you. The first time I saw me doing Carnage was on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Well, how else could I see it? There's no box set. There was no other way of seeing it. Somebody said, "Oh, I found you doing Carnage." Oh, really? Let me see. It's like, wow, that's me. So when you ask me whether they did anything to my voice, well, they did. You know, they put some effects and stuff, but I saw it on YouTube.
Yeah. And I wish they would do a box set for a lot of those old animated shows. Now that Marvel has been purchased by Disney, I hope eventually they will do that. So
yeah, I think what's happened with the streaming services, and now everybody has the box set.
technically, but if your internet goes down or your satellite signal's broken up, and then you get a choppy show, and then it's not worth watching if it's just, you know,
That's true.
You know, so,
That's
and
true.
that's one of the frustrations I have. Some nights I'm like, I'm going to bed. This thing is jumping all over. It'll play 2 minutes and then it'll, you know, be, you know, uploading, and then it'll play a few minutes and then upload. You know, it's like, okay, forget this. But sometimes it's just nicer to have the discs on hand so you can pop them in and play them and no worries.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know, speaking of discs, you were on Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles on PlayStation 1 back when the old school CD games came out for the first time, actually. And that was a game I played the heck out of, and I thought it was awesome that you actually played Obi-Wan Kenobi on that game, because I played that a lot.
Well, I'm also in the Phantom Menace game.
That's fantastic.
Which was a lot of, you know, I think we should go left. I think we should go right. I think we should go straight ahead. I think we should go back from where we came from. I don't, you know, there's
a lot
reams
of
and reams of this. Well, nothing compared to the scripts that you have today. If you look at the script of Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, you're probably talking about 150, 160 pages of dialogue. By the time you get into Grand Theft Auto 4, you're talking about over 1,000 pages. In Grand Theft Auto 5, I can't even begin to consider how many pages of dialogue, contextual dialogue.
Wow.
And really brilliantly done dialogue. I mean, just stunning. And it's absolute. I mean, you're talking about me doing something like those games, which might take a couple of days. For those guys, something like that, or something like Red Dead Redemption, or one of those AAA titles, you're talking about weeks and weeks and weeks in the sound booth. So to be on the sort of cutting edge of doing something like that, I mean, I can't begin to imagine what it's like. It's probably like doing a book on tape. I only ever did one, but it's probably the hardest job I ever had to do in voiceover.
Wow.
Because it's you in front of a microphone reading a book all day.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's pretty hard from some of the people I've spoken to that's their whole career. I don't think I could honestly do it.
What did they tell you about the toughest thing?
Well, I mean, they say, you know, you spend on average 13 to 20 hours on a read, and then you spend 13 to 20 hours editing. And I mean, you're like the whole production team. You do it all. And that's just seems like a lot of work for, you know, what I've come to understand is not the greatest compensation for the effort that they have to put in for it. So.
No, well, I mean, I did it. I didn't have to do any of the production stuff. It was just me sweating in front of a microphone for 8 hours a day. And it's the sort of thing that if you have to do a lot, you have to have time off, because your voice gets very, very tired, because you're talking nonstop for hours on end.
Yeah,
and it's quite brutal in that sense. And yeah, you don't get paid that much money to do a book on tape. But you know, the other thing is, and I think it's changing now, but doing video games is not the most lucrative of jobs to do. Because you're not, it doesn't work like TV shows like Gargoyles or Batman or Spider-Man or any of those things. Those that you are paid as if you were an on-camera performer, which means you get, you get residuals.
Yeah.
Okay. You're paid a fee. If you do more than if you do more than 2 or 3 voices, you get another fee, et cetera, and you get residuals. I still get residuals today from the work I did back in the 90s. I mean, it's comical. I live in Spain. How am I going to cash a check for, 49 cents? But I get them, which is nice to know.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things with SAG-AFTRA is that they were going to fight for a better deal for voiceover artists, and in the video game sphere. There's a lot of people who do a lot of good work, and and I'm sure their fee is considerably higher. There's a lot of people who are coming in and sort of name recognition, whether it's Kevin Spacey or various other people who come in to do video games. One of the greatest guys to do it was Vin Diesel. He runs he has the strange reputation of his video game of the what's it called? The science fiction movie, The Chronicles of Riddick.
Oh yeah.
The Escape from Butcher Bay. The video game is actually better than the last movie he made on the subject.
That's funny. I haven't actually played it, but that's funny to know.
Well, Vin Diesel is a big gamer, and he's a big role-playing guy. I mean, he still runs a game of D&D, apparently.
Oh, wow.
And you see that sort of influence all over the place. But anyway, back to not being paid too much. Yeah, a book on tape is a lot of work with not a great deal of money. Although it's nice to have done something, at least at that moment, relatively definitive. And the video game thing is that they're still fighting for that. That was back 20 years ago that people were still going, hang on a second, they're just paying us to do this and nothing else. And you're talking about something like Phantom Menace, which sold 10 million units or something like that.
Holy cow.
You're kind of like, there you go.
Yeah, and no residuals from that, unfortunately, either.
No residuals whatsoever.
Yeah, which is sad. Speaking of all these wonderful VO projects, one of the things I learned, Scott, was a lot of VO actors, kind of helped me understand that before you can get into VO and before most people even consider it or think about it, they are actors first and foremost before they're voice actors. And speaking of that, I know you got to play on the show Borgias from 2011 to 2014. And that was the one that starred... I'm thinking John Dooman, I believe.
Yep, that's him.
Yeah. And my wife absolutely loved that show, and she got me sucked into it. And I know you got to be a part of that in 5 different episodes as Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordova. And what was that like for you to get to be a part of that franchise?
That was great. Well, first of all, my wife was already in it. She's in virtually every single episode. She played Vanozza, who's the lover and concubine of the Pope.
Oh, yes, yes.
Hey, it was the 16th century. Every Pope's got to have a concubine.
Oh, yeah.
So she was in there playing that sort of matriarchal role. Wow. And I had been involved in the casting of it. I worked with the casting director here in Spain, and there was a lot of young Spanish actors who ended up being in the show because of it, which is peculiar because effectively the character of the Pope at that time is Rodrigo. He's a Spanish guy, and there's a lot of the characters who are effectively Spanish.
Yeah.
But there was no Spanish co-production, and none of it was shot in Spain. It was all shot between most of it in Prague and the Czech Republic, and some parts of it were shot in Italy. And it was great. It was the most expensive independent TV show made in European history.
Wow, really?
Each season cost probably in the region of 35 million euros.
Oh, wow.
But, that sounds like a lot of money. But then you look at something like The Crown, which cost $110 million for one season. Or you're looking at Game of Thrones. I can't even begin to imagine how much that costs.
Absolutely. Well, I know my wife and I got sucked into it, and then she told me it was ending or wasn't. It was already over because she just discovered it this last year. And I was like so depressed because I was like, it was done so well. And the stories were riveting. And like, it was kind of like you left on a cliffhanger every episode and wanted to know what's coming next because it's just that good, no matter what the stories were about. So...
Well, the guy who created it, Tom Fontana, is from New York, and he's been a showrunner, it seems like, all his life. He was the showrunner on the TV show Oz, which was on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
He had another show recently called Copper. And he's one of those guys who really does it. And his idea was always to do 3 seasons.
Okay.
He wanted to be loyal to the history of it and follow the 3-season arc of it.
Okay.
Where he made the first season was about the Pope, the second season was about Lucrezia, and the last season was about Cesare. That was the kind of thematic things that he wanted to put in those 3. And it was shot with the highest production values possible. The crews were incredibly professional, world class. And we had actors, there was 22 different nationalities.
Holy cow. Wow.
They were from everywhere, but we shot everything in English, curiously enough. And it's funny, when you're shooting something, a period piece, where there's 22 nationalities, the most alien accent is the American accent.
I bet.
Because it's the only contemporary accent. We can establish that the American accent really is native to America, and it's only in the last couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, in Lord of the Rings, it would be very grating if somebody spoke with an American accent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
We need something which implies age. So the interesting thing in that show is I'm playing Gonzalo Fernández de Córdoba, the great general of the Spanish armies. Now, the Spanish armies at that time, it was a little bit like being in the modern day, the head of the armed forces.
Okay.
In the United States, you had the biggest, toughest, baddest military force in the history of the planet, and that's what the Spanish were. So, my point of view of doing that is I was a war machine. I was a tank. I was, unstoppable and unkillable. And that's a kind of curious thing and quite difficult to play, because you are an unstoppable force, and then you have to interact with the Pope, who's also an unstoppable force. So that kind of makes things rather tricky, because you sort of have to act from the point of view of kind of being inhuman. Now, the Pope is allowed his frailty because it has his whole backstory, but really what I was representing was the armed military might of an entire nation that had managed to conquer most of the world, and now it happened to be in the process of conquering the Americas at that stage as well. But everything was extraordinary, from hair, makeup, costume. Armor looks cool. I recommend you don't wear it for more than a couple of hours at a time because it becomes very, very painful. Also, don't try and sneak up on anybody wearing armor. They will hear you. It's just clunk, clunk. It's true. You're like clunk, clunk, clunk. No. There's no stealth available when you're wearing plate armor.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you get to do occasionally as an actor. You get to be in armor, be on a horse, and for that little moment, it's the 16th century. You get to feel what it was like. You get to, experience that moment in the present day. Those are the cool things about being an actor sometimes. It was the same thing when I was working in the Ukraine doing Sharp's Rifle, which was a story about the Independence War, when the British were attempting to help the Spanish to liberate themselves from the French. And we did that with Sean Bean, and there was Brian Cox, and Daniel Craig was in it. It was it was one of those TV shows that every British actor eventually did. Pete Postlethwaite. I don't know if you know Pete Postlethwaite. He was in Jurassic. He was in the second Jurassic Park. He was nominated for an Oscar for In the Name of the Father. Magnificent man, awesome actor. If you saw him, you'd go, "Oh yes, I know who he is." So it was one of those experiences, and being dressed in a British lieutenant's uniform of 1812, I think it was, and being out there in the wilderness on a horse, it's pretty authentic. It's really what. I understand why people who do battle reenactments, or people who are into LARPing. LARPing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you any more about that in case you've done it.
Well,
that's fine. I'm not judging.
No, it's okay. No, well, as far as history goes, it's always been one of my absolute favorite things, especially when I studied it in school, for college and high school. So being a part of those historical shows it's super fascinating to me. And my wife is a huge fan, as well as myself, of the Borgias show. So I just had to talk with you about that. I have two final questions for you today, Scott, and I will let you go. The first one is, tell me a little bit about the Ethics and Film Training Foundation that you have.
Right. Well, in 1999, my wife, Assunta Serna, she wrote a book called El Trabajo del Actor del Cine, which means the work of the film actor. And she, after working in film for 20 years, decided to sit down and try and explain what she did and what her process was.
Yeah.
Because she's played so many leads that she actually had a methodology to approaching playing a leading actor in a movie, which nobody really talks about, because the people who do it don't sit down and try and explain it to anybody else. It's a rather rarefied pursuit. It's like teaching somebody how to fly a stealth bomber. You know what I mean? How many people are going to find that book interesting? they might find it interesting, but how many people are going to be able to apply it?
Yeah.
More than anything else. So from that, she was asked to teach a class, a master class, and I joined in. And because I'd had my revelations about film acting and how it worked and everything else. And then from that point, at the start of the 21st century, we started teaching short, intensive workshops and classes. And eventually that got to the stage where we were touring around Spain. We went to Portugal, and we would teach an intensive course over a week. Then in 2005, we decided let's extend that training, and we created our foundation. Our foundation is called First Team.
Nice.
First team comes from an expression in filmmaking, particularly filmmaking in the United States, well, only in the United States, where the second team are the light doubles,
okay,
the stand-ins, and the first team are the principal actors. So what they'll do is they'll go second team out, first team in, okay? Which we're in Spain. I've repented and I've regretted calling it first team from day one, because I'm like, nobody can say first team. I spend all day spelling it to people in Spanish. I should have called it something simple. But anyway, it's called First Team. And that's what it's been called for over 10 years now. And we started teaching longer courses, and we got to the stage where we associated ourselves with a university, and we taught a postgraduate course, the first, I believe, postgraduate course in film acting in the world.
Wow.
And we taught it at the university level. And that was a very long piece of training. It was about 1,500 hours. And we would always work with cameras, and we would culminate in shooting 5 or 6 short films with everybody. But our film training, we are always working on camera. We work in Spanish predominantly. And since we started, we have both taught around 11,000 hours.
Good Lord.
And in 2007, about 10 years ago, we got a grant to do our training elsewhere in South America from the Spanish government. So we taught in Argentina, Bolivia, Colombia, and in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
All in Spanish, which is interesting from a guy from Scotland going to Argentina and speaking my version of Spanish, which is even stranger. So there we taught in Buenos Aires, Mendoza, Cordoba, Rosario, Trelew, La Plata. In Bolivia, we taught in the capital, La Paz, and in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, Bogota in Colombia, and in San Jose in Costa Rica. And as they always say, nobody is a prophet in their own land. It was always great fun, and we made a ton of friends and inspired a lot of people to go on and work in film, not just as actors, but a lot of people went on to actually shoot the movies that they worked with us for the first time in public. They actually went on to actually shoot and finish and edit and distribute their films.
Oh, wow.
So we had a great time doing that. Of course, then the financial crisis arrived, which put an end to all of that, which is delightful. But we continued to work, and we published our first book recently about the first female film directors in Spain, which we have a presentation of that book this week. And we continue to teach and train. I work as a coach in movies. At the time, I spent 3.5 months at the end of last year on a TV show called, in English, it's called Queens, which was about Elizabeth I and Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yes.
Which was all shot in English, and very interesting because I had to convert Spanish people into Scottish people.
Wow, fantastic.
Which is pretty rough,
Yeah.
but it was a good experience for everybody all around. And this year we've started. Sometimes my wife, she just finished playing the lead in a movie where she plays a real character from a real story who was a nun in the end of the Second World War, helped rescue thousands of people from camps in the south of France, called the Train of Liberty.
The Train of Liberty.
I've just done 2 TV things back to back. One is called The Ministry of Time, which is a great Spanish TV show, which an American network actually ripped off, and they're currently in a lawsuit with them. They completely stole it. And I spoke to the director. I said, "Did they really steal it?" He said, "Yeah, they were here on set. I gave them the scripts."
Wow. Goodness. Oh, that's crazy.
They got the script. They got the Bible of the entire show. If
Wow.
they say they didn't steal it, they're just they're fibbing. And so I'm in the position now where I get to teach, I get to act, I get to do all that sort of thing, and I do voiceovers here. I do a lot of voiceovers in English, whether it's ads or what would be the word? Corporative stuff. There you go. I can't.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Speak English now. And every once in a while, the odd bit of animation, but there's not the sheer quantity of stuff that you'll find either in Los Angeles or New York or Toronto or Vancouver. It's a very sort of different style of working, which is peculiar in many ways, because hypothetically now with the internet, it should be easier than ever to be able to work from wherever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so that's the story with the foundation. The reason it's a foundation is we wanted to basically have a very clear mission statement, which is to dignify and professionalize the job of the actor in all the current mediums and future emerging mediums, to basically instill a sense of ethics, professionalism, and really dignify what we do as a job, because I think what we do as actors is an important job. It's not frivolous. It's a very important social service that we actually contribute to the world at large. We're there to entertain, illuminate, and give some people, let people have fun and dream a little bit. It's incredibly privileged, and we should take what we do seriously, but just not take ourselves too seriously.
Absolutely, Scott. Well, the last and final question I have for you today is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
That's a good one.
Thank you.
The legacy, no, that's a very good one, because a lot of the time when people are dissatisfied with what they're doing, it's because they really feel that they're not making a difference.
Yeah.
And I think just in the same way that you're creating right now, in your own podcast, you're creating a legacy. You're creating something that will become a point of reference. It'll be, and I think that's the magnificent thing with podcasts, is that it has allowed everybody to really do in-depth investigations, conversations, interviews about the things that we all love, or at least some of us love. I've heard the greatest interviews imaginable on podcasts, whether it's the Nerdist, whether it's on The Treatment, the KCRW podcast, on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. I think all of us who love podcasts all have something in common, which is, well, we're really seeing inside something. We're really seeing, to use the term again, the inside baseball of it all.
Yeah.
It's like Adam Carolla. I used to listen to Adam Carolla when on the radio in LA on K-Rock. And then I discovered probably, 6 years ago, he had his own podcast. And I think he's a brilliant broadcaster. And what he does is magnificent. And I see what he's done within the podcast community is that he has inspired a lot of people to do it and helped a lot of people to do it. He's gone on their shows. People listen to their show because they want to hear Adam Carolla, and people have subscribed to those shows and gone on to listen to them. And he has a great legacy in that sense. In terms of my legacy, what I want to do is I want to make sure that people are doing things for the right reasons. I want people to approach the job that we do with professionalism, that we learn that we need to treat each other really well. We need to respect each other and our jobs. And we really need to get back those things that we've lost with this great democratization of digital filmmaking, which is the absolute professionality of all the different departments who are part of the process of putting together a TV show or a movie or anything else like that. And if there's anything else, I want people to realize that this is not based on faith. This is based on very simple ethical and scientific principles of what we do, of how acting works, and how acting works within the context of the filmmaking team. There you go.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please just give us a closeout as Carnage from Spider-Man the Animated Series?
This is Carnage, asking you to subscribe to this podcast. Who did that voice?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate your time, brother.
That's great. It's an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the best. And I shall be listening to not only past but future episodes.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Scott Cleverdon, the voice of Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. Hey everyone, and thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Who Did That Voice. If you enjoyed today's episode, please check us out online on all social media platforms at Who Did That Voice and on YouTube at Who Did That Voice 24. Also, remember to check out our website, whodidthatvoice.org. Again, that's www.whodidthatvoice.org. Thank you to all my listeners out there. I just wanted to say, if you want to partner with Who Did That Voice, just telling your friends and family about us is the best way to share the show with others. And or leaving us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast from. The third and final way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Who Did That Voice.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.